Chemicals are critical to the food industry. They're used to clean and sanitize equipment and surfaces, reducing the risk of dangerous contamination. When handled properly, chemicals help us maintain an environment that is safe for food production. But when handled improperly, any chemical can be hazardous to your health and the environment. Improper exposure to chemicals can result in physical hazards such as flammability or hazardous vapors, as well as short-term health hazards like skin irritation and long-term health problems like burns or blindness. To use chemicals safely, you need to know what you use, what hazards they pose, and how you can reduce the risk to the environment, your coworkers, and yourself. National and local regulations exist to protect you, your coworkers, and the environment. One way this is done is by requiring certain information be provided for chemicals. The United Nations Globally Harmonized System, or GHS, is a system for both standardizing the classification and labeling of chemicals and harmonizing classification and labeling systems between nations that choose to adopt the GHS. GHS mandates a global standard format for information on every hazardous chemical, providing consistent information for using and storing chemicals. All regulatory agencies that govern the processing of food in some way must address the need for safe and proper use of chemicals. Employers are required to have a chemical safety program to reduce the risk of hazards for employees. There are several ways the program works to protect you. First, a chemical safety program must include information and training on chemical safety. Your employer must tell you about the hazardous chemicals used in your workplace and train you to work with them safely. Second, a chemical safety program must include a written program. Your employer will develop a written program and make it available to you. The written program explains your employer's hazard communication plan, which details how the hazards and risks of using chemicals in your workplace are communicated to you. The third part of the chemical safety program is a chemical inventory. Your employer will maintain a list of all hazardous chemicals used or stored in your workplace. The list might be written on paper or stored in a computer, but it must be available to employees and should be kept current. Fourth in the chemical safety program are safety data sheets, or SDS. An SDS is required for each hazardous chemical used in your workplace. The SDS describes the chemical, its hazards, and how to safely use, handle, and store the chemical. SDS must be kept up to date and in a place where workers on all shifts can easily find them. And fifth, labeling. Your employer must ensure that all chemical containers are properly labeled. The labels must clearly identify the chemical, and they must provide much of the same information that's on the SDS, but in less detail. Let's take a look at some of the things you should do to protect yourself and others when working with hazardous chemicals. First, maintain your personal hygiene. Always remember to wash and sanitize your hands thoroughly before starting work and after breaks. Also, remove any jewelry you have on. Jewelry can trap any chemicals you use and irritate your skin. It could even get caught in machinery. Be sure to wear the proper personal protective equipment, or PPE, for the chemicals you use, including face and eye protection, a chemical-resistant apron, and chemical-resistant gloves. Your PPE requirements may be a combination of what is listed on the safety data sheet and your facility's PPE policy. If you wear eye protection, make sure it's the right kind. Safety glasses with side shields offer general protection, such as from flying particles. Safety goggles fit against the face to help protect your eyes from chemical contact. You may also be required to wear a face shield to protect your face from chemical exposure. Failing to wear proper PPE, wearing PPE incorrectly, or wearing PPE that doesn't fit correctly can increase your risk of being exposed to a hazardous chemical. Even if you become hot and uncomfortable wearing your PPE, it is critical that you wear your PPE for protection against chemical exposure. Before you start working with a chemical, cuff your chemical-resistant gloves and wear your sleeves outside the gloves. Also, wear your pant legs outside your boots. That way, if a chemical spills, it won't run into your gloves or boots and burn you. You can find information about the proper use of PPE from the SDS, the product label, or your supervisor. If at any point you feel uncertain about a procedure, stop and ask your supervisor. Let's take a look at some actions to avoid when working with chemicals. First, never eat, drink, smoke, or apply cosmetics near hazardous chemicals. You might expose yourself to physical or health hazards. Also, never use a drinking glass or cup to measure or carry chemicals. It could be mistaken for a beverage or leave a dangerous residue. Never pour chemicals above your head. You won't be able to see the chemical level, and it may overflow or splash on you. Never add water to a concentrated chemical. Always add the concentrated chemical to cool water, never hot, so that if the mixture splashes, you'll be less likely to get burned. Never mix chemicals unless you are directed to do so. You might produce a harmful reaction. Never point a high-pressure rinse hose at anyone. The water pressure in the hose is so high it can damage an eye or even cut off a finger. Always add chemicals to a clean, closed container. Never carry chemicals in an open pail. Always transport chemicals in closed containers, never in open pail. If you're dissolving caustics and alkalis, only use cool water, never hot. Stand back and pour or add them slowly to avoid burns. Keep acids and chlorinated products apart. Your cleaning schedule should never allow these two chemicals to mix in a common drain. A chemical reaction could release dangerous fumes. And for any chemical, always use the proper concentration. Despite the best precautions, incidents can still happen when you work with hazardous chemicals, so it's up to you to be prepared. Know where the closest eye wash stations and emergency showers are located in your facility. Review your company's procedures for handling spills or leaks and for responding to injuries. And make sure you know your company's evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency, you need to act quickly. Ask a coworker to get additional help immediately. If an injured person is running, stop them and physically restrain them if necessary. Evaluate the situation. Depending on the type of injury, you may need to remove contaminated clothing. You might also need to flush the injured person's eyes or skin with cool water. Hold the eyes open for them if necessary. If medical treatment is required, be sure to give the product label or SDS to medical personnel.